It's a special TX Water Polo podcast. On Wednesday, we shared part of Joe's conversation with one of Texas's greatest water polo exports, Amy Olsen. And today, we'll share that entire interview with her while she talks about playing professionally in Europe, her experience on some of Texas's best high school teams, and much more, including her new puppy. And speaking of best high school teams, only 4.5 days remain to vote in our Best of Texas High School Tournament Championship. Sure, all the teams are from Baytown, Sterling, but the people must be heard. So go to TXWaterpolo.com to vote, and as always, check out more coverage at the national level at TotalWaterpolo.com. Now, Amy Olsen. Here we go. All right. Welcome. Today we have Amy Olsen, who graduated from Ross Sterling High School in 2010. So Amy was also the three-time state champion in 2007, 2008, and 2009. Also state MVP in those 3 years as well. After she graduated from Sterling, she went on and played at Iona and was a three-time All-American and four-time All-Conference, and played at 3 NCAA championships. Amy, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me and asking me to get interviewed.
Are you hanging in there kind of during the like the COVID-19 stuff?
Yeah, it's been some weird adjustments. It's obviously a bizarre time right now. But I adopted a puppy. So she's like my emotional support animal right now because I'm home all the time now and I usually am not. So I got a little puppy and
so what type of puppy?
She's a Maltese Shih Tzu. So she's really little. She's really small. And I got her because I thought it would be smart for, a condo dog. And, but she's a firecracker. She's still like keeping me busy. And I'll even be in like,
right? So,
what's that?
And barks at everything probably, right? So.
Yeah, she's nuts, but she's been a good distraction right now. So
when did you get her?
I got her about a month ago, right when we started going into quarantine. I've always wanted a dog, but like I said, I'm always gone for work. And running around, so I didn't think it would be, a good time to puppy train. So now is the time to take advantage. And my boyfriend finally was convinced that way that I could get one, so it worked out.
Yeah, well, good. I wasn't asking you, are you doing anything fun and exciting? And there you go. You have a dog. So that is more than enough. It's more than enough. We have two big golden retrievers back at our house. So, and but here, I know that this is going to go on the TX Waterpolo podcast. Have you been following like the Best of Texas kind of brackets and such? I know your team still is in the semifinals now. So
yes, exactly. I have a little bit, and I've listened to a few interviews, and it's interesting because I hear I was in a different perspective. I was the athlete at the time, so it's so interesting to hear from like Coach Mack talking about the 70s, the 80s, and so I'm like, what? And also even the bracket situation, of course, I've got some pride and a little bias to it. I'm like, thinking, of course, I'd like to be on the winning bracket. So I think it's a great idea.
I think Ross Sterling was well represented on both the boys and girls side, and they have 3 girls teams in the Final Four.
Yes. So, and that's, I think during that time, Sterling was strong all around, both men and women. Like you said, a lot of us went to play college water polo. If we didn't, it's because they didn't want to. All of us were in the club team. So it was a strong all-around program. So I would hope to see them both on the Final Four at least, or the top.
And they were strong from basically the mid '80s to the mid 2010s. It's like the one question I've had from people that didn't necessarily play back then. They're like, "What's Ross Sterling?"
Yeah, that's nuts to me. That like blows my mind.
I go, what are you talking about? But then I have to think they haven't been as strong the last few years. But that doesn't take away from kind of how good they were for a long, long time. So
right. Sure.
And you were part of that, and that's what we're going to talk about. So again, you grew up in Baytown, right?
Baytown, Texas. Yeah.
All right. So how did you get involved in water polo? I know you started whenever you were like 3 years old or something like that. But
actually, I didn't start as young as I wanted to, I guess. Like, growing up, I always would see some people, they started earlier and I would be a little jealous. But looking back, I'm I think I started at a great time. I started when I was 10 or 11.
Mm-hmm.
I started with the, Baytown Tiger Sharks or whatever it was for the summer league swimming. And then I remember Scott Slay or Shelby Slay, one of them pulled me over. It was kind of a babysitting thing, in my opinion. Both my parents were teachers and they worked in the summer, and water polo was an extra hour or two. So I was just a pool rat, and they would drop me off in the morning. It was less than a mile from my house. And I would hang out there, swim in the summers and play water polo. And so I was about 11 or 12. And just going back, you made me think of it about the Sterling comment. I remember just being on that like ugly green deck that we used to have and looking up at the banners at the state championships and being 11 years old and thinking, wow, I want to be on that, even so young. And you would see all the years that people had, that Sterling had won for both men and women. And when I first started, Coach Mack was still there. I had Scott was there as well, but my first couple of years in like the club level, I had Coach Mack, Scott Slay, Shelby Slay, Rudy a little bit, a lot of coaches. So it was such a great environment to feel encouraged from all ends. But I felt really proud to be at Sterling. I felt really proud that I was in that program.
And you started about 2001 or 2002, around that time?
Yeah, I think that would be I know Shelby Slay was in high school. Like she was winning and I thought, wow, I want to be like her. This like strong woman, this girl, she's like kicking ass. And, I remember reading an article in the Baytown Sun about like her swimsuit being ripped and she gets right back in the pool. I'm like, wow, she's a badass. I want to be like her.
So, they were a strong program. I think the Baytown Sterling team won in 2001 for both boys and girls. So that probably kind of motivated you to kind of be part of that. And just a little aside, like we talk about Sterling, they may not be in the talk nowadays as far as the high school teams out there, but I played in a high school state championship back at Ross Sterling back in the late 80s, early 90s. So at that pool. So could you imagine at that pool, a high school state championship?
Wow.
Probably not.
No, I can't.
No, yes. But obviously like you started playing kind of with the summer league team and then you started playing a little bit more club and year round. And then you went to like kind of tournaments like Speedo Cup. So kind of tell us about that a little bit.
Yeah, my first trip away even from home by myself, it started with water polo. And that really was like the segue. It was foreshadowing my whole life, honestly, of just traveling for water polo. So I went to Speedo Cup and I had, my best friends with me. I had Katie Vasquez and Madison Pepper was there, I think. And of course, like, the men's side too. It was so fun. You had Matt Chapa, Zane, and just the crew. And we went to Speedo Cup in Missouri, right?
Mm-hmm.
It was Missouri.
Oh, yeah.
And, it was just a blast, but that was the first time I had a few things. One, like a wake-up call that, wow, there's water polo that's bigger than us, It's eye-opening. And it was also my first time that I got really competitive because I knew that I wasn't like the top tier of my team. I knew that I was, I didn't get as much playing time or I could tell that I was viewed a little bit less skilled or talented. So I really sparked my competition that way because I thought, wow, I want to play the whole time. I want to be the best. So it was a really cool experience to go there. And we even went to Albuquerque one year. We drove on a bus there for like 8 hours. I
heard about that story where like kind of didn't the toilet break down or something like that?
Yes, the toilet broke down. And so we were in this, big bus for hours going to this, tournament. And we're like, this is just, we did it to save money, but I mean, it wasn't worth it. I mean, that was ridiculous, but.
Hey, but it's a good story. It's one of those things where
I think I blacked some of it out. It's so scarring.
In the moment, you're like, oh my God, I can't believe I did this. But for the Speedo Cup, how many Speedo Cups did you play in? And for those that don't know, Speedo Cup is what is now called Champions Cup. It's the tournament. It's the 8th grade and under boys and girls tournament that happens every November. And this past November, it was at the University of Houston kind of actually. So
that in itself to me is, it's really cool that it's in Houston now, but that is impressive that it's, that just says a lot about Texas water polo, that we're part of we hosted it one year. I think that's really cool. But I was there 3 years. My 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. That's the 3 years that I went.
So how was that going as a 6th grader? Like, obviously there were some older players there with you, and you were just probably in awe with your eyes wide open.
Yeah, that's when, and I keep thinking of the plaques that we had when you would go, to get like the picture of yourself. And actually, I remember my parents couldn't go. So my parents, like I said, they're school teachers. I had 2 other siblings, like they couldn't go to these trips with me. Sure. So I had one of the parents, she even bought me like a action shot. And the action shot, like looking back, I was like, my chin's in the water. Like, I could barely swim with the ball, but she got it for me. And I remember I had it forever in my room. And, we have the awkward team photo at the end. But I was, 6th grader, not with my parents. I was just, kind of had the coaches watching me like, sorry, Scott. And, and I just remember just looking up to a lot of people and a lot of learning that trip.
And then it must have changed a lot between your 6th grade year and your 8th grade year. Obviously, you went back as an 8th grader. Yeah, you were probably like the big alpha female on the team and stuff like that. So.
Yeah, I think I grew a lot too in that time, as far, not physically, but as far as just my IQ, my water polo IQ. And I was able to compete with a lot of those teams that I didn't feel comfortable before. That's when I grew a lot of confidence. And like I said, back to the competitive thing, by the time I was in 8th grade, I was starting and, playing every minute. And then I was very excited to play at Sterling the next year. So for me, that was a good feeling.
But weren't you also, I forget exactly what place you guys got, but weren't you competitive with like the top teams at Speedo Cup that year too?
Yes, we were. I don't remember exactly what place we got, but I do know that we started to kind of, that group of people, probably some of the people in that 2007 group that is in the bracket that should win.
There you go. It's okay. Pump them up.
Subliminal messages.
Okay.
But okay. I remember that's when we all started growing. It wasn't just me that was growing as a player. It was all these other women. And I think that's when people started noticing us too. We started kind of making a name for ourselves even then at Speedo Cup. Yeah. So it was
and then that took you guys into high school. And a lot of those kids that were on that Speedo Cup team also went to Ross Sterling High School at the same time.
Yes.
And that kind of had that core group, kind of what you were saying as that group that's like the Sterling girls kind of dominated from about 2007 all the way up to about 2014. So that was like the core group that kind of got that started. I think you guys had a bunch of freshmen and maybe a couple sophomores that almost won state your freshman year. I think you lost to Humble that year, but then that just kind of got you guys on a roll starting your sophomore year and beyond, right?
Right. Yeah, that was a good way to, kind of kick us off. Just even like our passion for water polo, we had it before we were even freshmen in high school. So we were kind of ahead of the curve in that way, I think, because we all competed together and we were all best friends and hung out together. It was our, it was our daycare. It was everything. So we were really ready to kick off the season.
So what did you think about Scott as a coach back then? Because that was whenever Scott had transitioned to being the head coach for MAC. That was probably quite a difference, right?
Yeah. And in fact, my 8th grade year, that's when Mac not retired. He went to St. Agnes.
Or Lamar.
What's that?
He went to Lamar.
Lamar, sorry. And that's whenever I do remember even feeling sad because I had always wanted him to coach me, because growing up, I would just remember his loud voice. And I don't know, I thought it'd be great. And then Scott Slay comes in and, that was, I don't know, not a catalyst, but I think that was a very important time of my life. And it was really important that he was my coach because he was very good at humbling me in a way. Like he always put me in my place. And in fact, it was hard to even squeeze a compliment out of him. So, and I think he was also probably transitioning as a coach himself. Like he was probably transforming and he was, in this head coach capacity. So looking back as a coach myself now, I can kind of see, he's younger and probably trying to keep this little sassy girl from Baytown in her place the whole time. So
I don't think you were the only sassy girl from Baytown, by the way.
Yeah, there were a few sassy girls from Baytown. It's like part of our criteria.
That's okay. That's okay. They're like, let's just say the Dirty Bay moniker was earned, right? So
yes, Dirty Bay. We were pretty proud of that too.
No, and I completely kind of understand. But you guys pretty much dominated. So like between your sophomore year and your senior year, did you guys lose the game?
I don't think we did. Not with high school.
Yeah. No. I mean,
not one. In fact, my senior year, the championship game, I don't remember the score, but I know it was it was 20-2 or something. Like it was.
Yeah, like that was against Stratford, and I don't think Scott. Let's say Mike Hoskovic kind of wasn't a big fan of that at the time. But I mean, you were during your junior senior year, you also went through to what Mac and I kind of dubbed the Civil War a little bit, kind of when there was a fall state championship and the TXWaterpolo spring championship. Going through that as a player, how was that? How did that go with you? Did you care? It was just waterpolo.
I did care. I think that's an interesting question because I remember feeling a sense of uncertainty during it because I don't know, you're used to one way, and even, when you're in like those years that I was in Speedo Cup and club, you're used to looking forward to a certain time of your life. And then when you finally get to there and it changes, it's a little disruptive. But I remember just kind of honestly being loyal to whatever Scott wanted. So maybe I didn't even have my own opinion, but I was very loyal to, whatever his opinion was. So it was a weird time, but by the time I was a senior, it's like whatever, I was over it. So, it was a little weird.
I mean, and also you were on some of probably what I would consider it's not just the best kind of high school group that I think for girls ever, but you were also part of some of the better club kind of group of girls as well, especially like your 16 and your 18 and under years, like the non-Sterling girls were Taylor Barnett. There was a couple of kind of others that I can't think of.
Taylor Silva.
There you go.
Clear Lake girls and boys.
And those were some of the strongest teams. And for those that are listening, I mean, you guys were out at JOs and this was back whenever there was only the 48 girls, right? Like the 48 kind of girls teams. You were at JOs and competing for top 10.
Yeah.
At that point.
Oh yeah.
And not just hoping to get into platinum, which is the top 24.
Yeah. No,
so and that must have been kind of fun, right?
Yeah, those are the best trips of my life. I mean, the all around, not just being with your friends and going on a road, to California, but the competitive games were so challenging, just mentally and physically. And, you learn every game you're done and you feel like you're beat up and you just learn so much because you're playing against people who play that same level every weekend. So you felt like, David Goliath all the time. You have a chip on your shoulder. You go in there, you want to show them who's, we can play at from Texas, and of course, just a lot going on when you go into that. Like it's like an arena, when you go in to the games, and being competitive helps a lot because it's one thing to go in and you're like, crap, I'm gonna get my ass handed to me. But when you actually have good people on your team, you get a little bit more fiery. And more competitive. So, I mean, that's what I think is amazing to me, even like from a coaching perspective now, like going back to it, whenever I am coaching athletes that were my age at the time, I wish I knew how talented we were at the time. I wish we really, I don't know. I didn't realize it, how good we had it.
Well, I mean, y'all were a great team. And a little side note, after I moved up to Dallas in the summer of 2009, we went out there, and I guess it was actually the summer of 2010. And we were out there for I had brought a Dallas water polo girls kind of a club team out there, and I actually left them kind of with some coaches and some other parents. And I actually went and watched you guys play one time. It was at USC. Yeah. I mean, I think I said hi just because, this is a lot of girls. So this was a lot of the girls that I kind of helped kind of coach a little bit and such like that. So
you're a big impact to us. I'm not just saying that because you're interviewing me, but you really were it wasn't just Scott Slay. We had a lot of coaches that helped us, but I do think you had a big impact on that discipline we were talking about before with playing in players, as far as little things like going to the 2 meters and weighing out properly, playing defense properly, keep your hips up, etc. I can go on and on. Yeah. But Scott, you guys have your strengths in different ways, but you certainly instilled a discipline in the Dirty Bay girls that I think we needed. Like Scott almost let us out of our cage and let us go. You kind of brought us back in to an extent. So it was kind of a good team, a good pairing, I think, that we had. But we were fortunate that we had you during that time too, because of those different kind of fundamentals that we were disciplined with.
Yeah, so I always joke around with people, kind of whenever Scott and I started kind of working together, I probably kind of showed him how to be a little bit more organized as far as practice, but he showed me how to kind of loosen up a little bit and have a little bit of fun and stuff like that. So, and I think we worked really well together, and I think the kids enjoyed it and stuff like that. And one of those things that we did at that time also is, and I know this upset the boys to all not, but we brought the girls out to the Women's Open and 20 under national championships, which for those that are just listening and have never heard about it, this is like the Super Bowl for the women's water polo. Yeah, just out there. And it was the 20 and under championships kind of were a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And then the Open championships were a Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And I know that you went out there on those trips, and I kind of brought you guys out there I didn't think that we were going to win the tournament, but I wanted to do something a little bit more challenging and different kind of for that main group that was like kind of to push them. So we had a couple kids back from college that played, but our average age was about 16. How did you like those trips? Because you were on the younger age then, I think. That you were like the 16 or 17 at that time.
I think one of the trips I was the youngest, or me and Katie, we were the youngest. And that was one of my favorites. Was the first year we went, even though we lost every game except 1 or 2.
We always won a game in every tournament. We never got last. Okay. I do remember that. So there you go.
Yeah. But that was the year I played with girls that were older than I was, and talented, that had played in college, or maybe they just graduated, like Kristen Barnett, for example, among a few others. So for me, that was a really good experience to be with them and learn from them, and teach me, different, I guess it's a different way of playing sometimes too. Like you have to switch gears. I was used to kind of being the leader on a team, and then all of a sudden I'm with them and I have to, be adaptable. So that was a good lesson for me. But it was incredible to play against really talented teams. And I think we played against Betsy Armstrong, NIAC. And now like looking back, I'm like, wait, I was playing on NIAC a few years ago even, but I remember when we scored on Betsy Armstrong, I'm like, yes, like we were so excited. And
there you go.
Just little things like that.
And I think that second year we went, I think we lost the game in overtime against SoCal. That would have put us in the top 8 for the 20 and under, where, I think we were even beating SoCal until they scored like in the last minute or so. So, that group of girls was, again, I will say this, that was one of the most talented group of girls that like, your group a couple years ahead of you and a couple years behind you. That was about 6 years of just strong kind of female water polo. So,
I agree.
And then after you graduated and you did all that, then you went out to Iona and played. Yes. How did you pick Iona? Why Iona?
Well, I had spoken with you actually. I remember you
a long time ago,
spoke with my dad and I talking about options for me, and I was considering big schools such as Michigan, UCLA, USC. I was really thinking about those schools and considered seriously Michigan, and took a trip out there and everything. But ultimately, Iona gave me what I really wanted, which was a chance to, one, develop as a player, be in a place I wanted to be near Manhattan, and I wanted to play. So I knew that if I went to one of the bigger schools, yes, I would play, but not the extent that I wanted to. And also, it kind of came down to money ultimately. Like, I'm forgetting one of the main parts.
Of course,
if you get a full ride at one place, it's hard to turn it down to go pay out of state tuition at another. I didn't have the means to go. My chances pickings were slim for me in a way.
So you got a full ride for academics and athletics to go to Iona?
Yeah, yes. Ultimately, I was taken care of. I'm very fortunate. So that's one thing that I do still tell people when I'm coaching, and I remind other girls that I still stay in contact with when I was coaching in California 2 years ago. I just keep trying to remind them that it does not, I mean, you can figure it out. You can play. Even if you don't think you're the best, there is a school for you. There's a way you can figure it out. If a girl from Baytown, Texas, who didn't have much money, you know, I had no choice. I knew I had a, my ticket out of there was academics and athletics. And even if you don't have one or the other, I mean, you can figure it out if you do the work and do your research and find your contacts to help you to find the right school for you. So I was very fortunate that I already had Kathleen Link. We, you know, was a Texan. She was already there. So that was helpful. Like we had a connection. You knew Brian Kelly, and that was you know, it helped me to be comfortable. And after that recruiting trip, and I'm, you know, in the city, I'm like, how can I not go here? This is great. And
Exactly.
and Brian Kelly's really good at selling you for Iona. He's like taking you to Nyack, like, hey, you can play with Nyack in the summers, and which he's right. I mean, I did, but he's really good at selling Iona.
He's good at selling, like kind of Iona, and he's a good motivator too. He will get the kids ready to play. And,
yes.
Like and going.
We've reached the halfway point of today's conversation and will return in a moment.
In many podcasts, this time would be filled with ads for electric toothbrushes or recruiting services. Not here. Instead, we're asking you to show your support for TXWaterpolo by donating to it. Go to txwaterpolo.com/donate and help us continue covering the sport we love in the Lone Star State.
Hi, this is Natalie Benson, and you are listening to a podcast about water polo in Texas.
And now, the conclusion of today's conversation.
If you missed it at the beginning, Amy was all conference, I think first team all 4 years, correct? And also an All-American 3 times and played at 3 NCAA Championship tournaments. Just tell us about like the water polo kind of in college. Good, bad, what?
Well, I mean, a little bit of everything, because Iona was an interesting place because you know how it feels to win, but you know how it feels to lose. And what I mean by that is you're not, you know, you can win, you know, the games in your conference, but you also had really competitive ones like with Marist or Wagner. Mm-hmm. And then you would also go to a California trip and play top 10 schools and get your butt kicked. So I felt like I had a good dynamic there. I had a good team, especially my freshman year. I was able to start my freshman year, and I basically got a lot of playing time. I played almost every minute starting my freshman year. And that's because I think I really gelled with the starters already. So I was playing with seniors and juniors, but I think he was able to just kind of put me wherever. That was one of my, kind of got lucky that way, honestly. Yeah. It's not like I was just a goalie or, you know, only 2 meter, like I can kind of do whatever. So I was really able to develop, and we went to a lot of tournaments all over the Northeast. We went to Michigan, California, and then of course, NCAA. To go to the NCAA, you have to win your conference. So the first time we went, my freshman year was the first time Iona won the MAC championships. So not only was it the first time we won a conference, we went to NCAA and competed for the top 8 teams. So when you go there, it just felt like I don't mean to like put water polo down, but you know, we're not treated the same collegiately as other sports, obviously, because we're not the moneymaker.
Okay. But you're still treated well.
Oh yeah, we're still, yeah. I mean, we get gear, everything's compensated, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't get me wrong. I think
it's still the NCAA championships. It's just not on ESPN. That's all. So
right. And to be fair, some of them were, you know, it was really well done as far as streaming live, so your parents can see from home, and you still got a lot of gear. And when you go to NCAA, it's not the conference taking care of you; it's NCAA. Yep. So you get all this nice gear, you get interviews pre and post game, and it was really cool to be treated like that. And know that other people viewed your sport and what you're doing as important.
Now, one thing that I remember talking to Brian Kelly, kind of during your while he was recruiting you, he was like, "What position is she?" I go, "Well, we don't really have a position here. She's utility, so we try to teach all of them kind of to do everything. Amy can do pretty much everything very, very well. So that's kind of still, I know that's what a lot of coaches here in Texas kind of try to instill, because they might be a center player on their club team, but they might be an attacker on their high school team, but then they get to college and they might be a center defender. So, I mean, going into college with that background, so do you think that hurt or helped you?
Oh, it definitely helped. I think that's just even more, I mean, it just goes back to what I was saying, that I think that's why I was able to be a starter my freshman year, because I wasn't the best, yet. I wasn't quite there, but I had the potential to be, and I still was able to help the team. And I think he was able to see that. And, having a good team around you helps you to be successful. So if I have a good teammates around me, of course they can make me look good, but I also, it's not like I needed to score every game. If he wanted me to play 2-meter defense, then that's where I was at. So I think that was really helpful, that we were able to just kind of learn every, utility. Like you said, you're able to do it all.
Okay. Now, also in college, you went out and played in these different tournaments, and then you got to see all your buddies from Texas. Was that kind of fun, right?
That was the best. We always would take pictures every time you see Taylor at Bucknell, Tara at Michigan, Allie when she was at Maryland, and any of the California girls. That was the best feeling. And then to be in the locker rooms with them after and just like shooting the shit and just talking about everything. And it was such a good feeling, especially a lot of the times my parents didn't even get to watch me play. Like my parents didn't really see my games. So it felt amazing. I felt so proud, when I would see Taylor, I'm like, hey guys, it's my friend Taylor. I'd be really proud, it's like having family there.
I mean, yeah, but it's also kind of nice to see. I mean, I think I went out. Yeah. Did I see you? I think I saw you play one time. You and Kathleen out in out in Cal Baptist. But it's just kind of seeing all these Texas kids. That just made that must have kind of made you feel kind of a little proud about. Hey, listen, we are good. Because even though you got to kind of Iona, there's still the quote unquote the California girls, right? And
absolutely.
And then they didn't. Oh God, kind of you're from Texas. Once they saw you play, they probably didn't care.
Right.
But you're like, hey, look, there's more of me. There's a lot of them.
Right.
So
that's a great point, because I've always had a chip on my shoulder with that, I think, and it gave me a lot of pride to have them. Like, I'd be proud of Madison Pepper and say, yeah, she's from Texas. I definitely had a lot of pride with that.
No, I mean, and I thought that was kind of, I mean, I always just was kind of proud, just kind of watching, from afar about all the kids, boys and girls that were out there. And I'd always see on the social media, like the pictures and such. And that was just great. That made me a little proud. And I know Scott and I would have a beer or whatever and talk about it and stuff like that. So, but now, so after Iona, okay, like you played at 3 NCAA championships, you were All-American 4 years in a row. Then you did something that not very many people get to do. You got an opportunity to go play overseas. Kind of take us through that journey.
Wow. So it, when I was graduating, of course, I was looking at I had an internship to go in the city, and I was really compelled to kind of get my career going. However, I had always wanted to be on the national team or play professionally. I wanted to be better than what I was. I felt like I had more room to grow as a player, and I didn't think I would ever make the Olympic team. I felt like that ship had sailed. So the next thing I thought was, well, I'm going to play professionally. I'm going to be a professional. So I knew that I had to go abroad to do that. I had to figure it out, just like that Baytown girl Baytown girl all over again. Like, how do I get out of here? What do I do? And so I would just have to, find my connection. Who do I know? And I was able to connect with Chris Vidal. He's the husband of Betsy Armstrong. And she was playing in Lille, France at the time. So he was able to connect me to the French teams, and they, watched some video. I had I think like a reference or something. And I ended up getting a chance with them. And the first year it was really, low paying contract, but I remember it was a low paying contract. Like I'm thinking 500, 600 euros a month, free room and board, you get like free baguettes, whoop-de-doo, it's in the contract.
That's okay.
And, but ultimately I wanted to travel. I wanted to learn a language, and I wanted to be better and see what other kind of water polo is out there. I felt like I had experienced American water polo. What else? Like, we're not the only good people out there. So I thought that would be a great way to do it. And once again, I like milk water polo into kind of learning and going new places. So I went to Saint-Jean-d'Angely, which is right by Bordeaux. It's like 30 minutes away. And so I went there for my first year. And there we played, it's like if you're, Hell Weeks, twice a day. That's how it was every day, because that's your job.
Yeah.
So it's
you were a professional water polo player.
Yeah. So that's,
you were getting paid.
Right.
It may not have been a high paying contract, but you were getting paid, which was,
right.
Kind of
so,
great.
We were, training every day and traveling. We'd go on like the minibus, they called it, which is just this big van, and you would travel and go to we went to Spain, we went to the south of France, we went all over, just exploring. And after the game, it wasn't all glamorous, because after the game, you would eat dinner. Their games, by the way, they're like 8 p.m., 9 p.m.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Like
and then you eat dinner at 10 or 11. Yeah. So
right. So we had dinner, and then we get right back in the van and go back home. You get home at like 4 a.m. So that was just a good experience, because it was kind of humbling in the sense of, you're not in the NBA or anything like that. But it was really, really cool to compete with those girls, because a lot of them were Olympians, not just on my team. I mean, on my team, I had 4 women, I think, at the time, that were on the French national team. Nice. So, I mean, that in itself was incredible. And then I'm playing against the Spanish teams with Olympians. And I mean, it was really, really cool.
So did you play with anybody else from the United States at all?
So in the United States, I did. My first year, I had someone actually from Iona was with me. She was a goalie.
That must have been nice, right?
That was really nice. She only was there for half of a season. She ended up going back home because it wasn't for her, but that was comforting. First time going abroad. It's like, you see the trend here, 6th grader going by herself to St. Louis. And then I go to Iona, 18. My parents didn't even go move me into my dorm. Like, I remember I moved in by myself. Then now I go to France, but it really prepped me for France. I mean, to be fair. So I had Marissa with me my one season, but after that she left. One of my best friends of all time of life, Olivia Cummins, I played against her. She was at USC, so it's just, I was able to connect with players I never would have known. She was my roommate. Now, she'll be my wedding, like she's just a great friend. And then the next year because I was there for 2 years, I was able to be on the team with 2 other foreigners who were on the Mexican national team. So in the house, we would speak to each other in French or Spanish, a little bit of English. So it was really interesting.
So kind of, did you learn French?
I did. So the first year that was actually part of the contract too. They gave us free French lessons. And
nice.
And I didn't think anything crazy. I mean, I had done a little bit of Spanish in school, but I was never a linguist by any means. But when I went to, after your first year of being in the league, people get to know who you are, coaches know who you are, especially being an American. I think you have an advantage, honestly, because they do value NCAA in the collegiate level. So, you become well known by coaches just by default. And what was fortunate is after your first year, that's when, if you want to go back a second year, you get your foot in the door and people end up knowing who you are and seeing you play. So that's when that's when the bigger contracts come in. Not that they're anything extravagant, but
Yeah, but you got to raise your second year, you're saying. Is that what you're saying?
Definitely. Yes, certainly. That's where my sales came in. My negotiation skills started kicking in. Well, ultimately, I didn't actually think I'd end up going to the same place, to be honest with you. But what really made me decide to go back to that team was because I was in between, for example, looking at places in Spain and other places that honestly I had wanted to go originally. But the fact that I had already almost gotten fluent in French, but I wasn't quite there, I wanted to go back so I could become fluent. That's really why I went back the second year. First year, it's like, okay, I want to be really good at water polo. I want to compete with the best. The second year, I'm like, no, I'm going to be fluent by the time I leave. So I was very disciplined. I practiced. I'd watch movies in French. Only spoke to my teammates in French. And then I just one day clicked, like I was dreaming in French. I'm like, yeah, I got it.
There you go.
So that's one reason why I went back the second year to France, honestly.
So how was the water polo? So how was your water polo there? So did you play a little bit your first year, a lot more your second year? I mean, lot your first year?
It was like a cycle of Iona all over again. I played every minute of every game. I was able to kind of play wherever they needed me. I was pretty offensive on that team the first year. The second year I played a little bit more 2-meter defense because we had another foreigner who's more offensive. So again, it went right back to that utility kind of player. I did everything because I was able to. So that was definitely helpful. I played every minute. Honestly, it was exhausting.
So you got to kind of play in different places in Europe. What was the strangest place you played? Like the weirdest place? There's no fans or there are a ton of fans.
Oh my God.
Wow. You get out of the van and you go, where are we at?
Oh my gosh, that's a really good question. Well, a few things are coming to mind. There were like a few places in France that you would go in these big, like extravagant places, majestic looking almost. And then you're like, wait, there's a pool in here? And it'd be like this crummy indoor pool. And you're like, what? This is like 1,000 years old. Where are we?
It's kind of like the Nyack indoor pool, isn't it? Like
yes.
You go to some, like this nice place and then the Nyack pool is at the bottom of the place.
Exactly. Okay. That's a great way of putting it. Yes. And then another place, I would say, what's really cool, I think, was even our pool was that I practiced in, and my home pool was very unique because it was a small town, but it was it looked like, have you seen Beauty and the Beast? Because if you haven't, I'm going to be upset with you. Okay. So Beauty and the Beast, it was like that little village, like it was a small little country village, but everyone was super into water polo. It was like, they were so prideful in that even people from 30 minutes away would come in and watch us play. They charged at the door for even women's water polo. So it was a really prideful thing, and the whole stadium would be full. It could have a lot of people in there. Hundreds. So that was exciting because you knew every game at 9 p.m. or whatever on Saturdays that there would be a full house cheering for you, and they would know your name. Like the little kids come up for autographs. So it was really cute. That was really the most exciting place to play, was my home pool, because it had such a pride to it, a pride factor. But after my 2 years in France, my next place that I went to play was, I went to school in England. I threw in the towel in my mind at first. I thought, okay, how do I finagle water polo even more? Okay, I want to get my master's. So how do I get my master's for free? Okay, what do I do? So
there you go.
I can't play in NCAA anymore. So there's Durham University, which is like the top 3 universities in England. They have this program where they want to bring American athletes in, and they help pay for tuition. Part of that is some of the sports you help coach, even like water polo where it's underdeveloped, or you're just purely a player. So you get half off tuition basically, and you play the sport still in another country. So I'm like, of course, this is for me. And I thought in my mind, okay, I'm winding down from professional twice a day playing. Well, I couldn't stop playing because what kept happening was coaches kept calling and kept giving great deals. And I kept saying, no, I really want to get my education and I want to get back to America soon. So eventually one coach that I knew in France, he's Greek and he lives in Athens, and he just started his own, or he got to be the head coach of one of the teams in Athens. And he called me and he said, okay, I have a deal for you. And I'm like, I told you already, I'm going to get my education. And he's like, no, what we'll do is we'll fly you just for the games. I was like, from England? He's like, yes. I was like, can I stay there a few weeks in the year and train, And so he's like, we'll do whatever. So they would fly me to games. I would come
VIP
in.
treatment here. There you go.
I know. I just really milked it. So their team was really good. So that was awesome. I mean, that was the best thing ever.
So you played in Greece and you were flown around and you got a free education to play in Durham and you played there too.
Yes. So I also played in the English league for the, university level, which is very low level right now. I mean, maybe they'll get better, but it's pretty low level. So it wasn't like it was challenging, but it was interesting because, again, you got to drive in a van or the train. You went to Edinburgh, Scotland. You went all around. I mean, that's when I traveled the most. I went to Ireland. I was in Greece every other weekend. And even talking about it now, I feel ridiculous because I'm like, And
you were like 24, 25 at this point, right?
Yeah. And I had, and I was getting paid every game in Greece. And so I would just spend that money as my little, traveling money and getting my master's. And it was the best year of my life, honestly, because I got to travel with my really good friends and people would have excuses to come visit me. And actually I went to Japan with Zane Bilal and his family. So
nice.
He was going for his own thing. And I'm like, well, I'm already here, even though it was still a million years away. But, so I got to do a lot of those great things, all because of water polo. Like if I didn't have that skill, there's no way I could have done that. I didn't have the money. I was like recent college graduate.
So if there's anything that you could get out of, like kind of tell like the boys and girls back in Texas about, kind of your experiences and like, what is the one thing that you would say to them? Like kind of work hard, keep playing.
Yes. And it sounds so cheesy, but it is like truly like if you really want something, you can figure out a way to do it. And I go back to that little girl, that went to, to Missouri in 6th grade. And I knew I wanted to keep traveling and keep playing. And I wanted to get out of Baytown, and I think some people, especially I've noticed in girls, maybe not all girls, obviously, but sometimes I notice in athletes when I coach that we think if we're not the best, all of a sudden we can't do something or, it's a little intimidating, but that's not true. I think that even playing abroad and even playing in England and all these countries, there are so many players in America that are better than those players, but they probably never knew that. And just knowing people who even were on national teams in France, I think couldn't even start on my Iona team sometimes. I really think that at points. So to me, that just goes to show, back to your point, that I do think that if you really want to go play at an NCAA program, or even if it's D3, D2, you can certainly do it. I think if there's a will, there's a way. If you want to play abroad, those universities that I was talking about, it's not just Durham now. They started the trend. The last 3 years, more schools in England have done that. So it's not just in the north of England, it's near London. They're starting to do that. But the thing is, you can't just be, if you want to stick with water polo, you have to stick with it. You can't play 3 different sports. You just cannot. You cannot do that if you want to be a Division I athlete in one sport. I'm sorry. Unless you're MJ and Michael Jordan, it's not realistic. So to put it in perspective, I practiced, in the summers, for example, so many hours in the morning and at night, and I did club year round. I worked for it. So,
you took advantage of your opportunities.
Right. So I think if it's so cheesy to say about the working hard thing, but it's absolutely the truth. Just like anything in life, you can't just be talented. You really have to work hard for it, and it will certainly pay off because I'm just thinking of that last highlight in Greece of my life where I'm traveling to Greece and I'm getting paid for it and I'm getting my master's. But I wasn't even working that hard anymore as far as water polo because I had already had it. I worked smarter, not harder at that point, but it's because I put all the work in before. Yep. So I really hope that especially young women I don't think they understand sometimes the high school athletes, that there are those scholarships out there. I don't think parents know. I think parents need to understand that there are so many scholarships out there, or other ways to help provide for that education and still compete.
And then, I mean, and it's not like to get that peak year of water polo, that last year with Greece and England, you had to make sacrifices along the way. Like, you know, New York City and Iona is a long way from Baytown, so you were away from your parents for a while. I mean, and Europe obviously is even further, but it was definitely worth it in the end, correct?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that's a great way of putting it, with the sacrifice. I have put so much sacrifice into the sport. I mean, even as this is like such a weird weird thing to say, but I keep thinking, even in college, when I would, after practice, you run to class and you have your hair in a wet bun and you don't put makeup on and you see all the pretty girls and they're all done up. And I'm like, dang it, I want to feel pretty today. And I'm like, well, I want to be better at water polo than I want to feel pretty right now. So little, I mean, that's a weird example, but it really sticks out because that's not the only time of in spring break, everyone's doing fun stuff, but we're in season and we have to go play.
Exactly.
Like little things like that, that I didn't have as much of a normal experience. Maybe it's not like I was in a sorority or something, but my team was my family. So that's always what saved me, is having a team around me, that I'm still best friends with so many of them.
And then after you came back from England, you actually coached and you went to JOs, and I remember seeing you on the pool deck. How was it coaching? Like the opposite side, up there. And then you go, so now I understand what Scott and Joe were going through. So there you go.
I know. Actually, I feel so sorry for y'all. I don't know how you put up with us. I really don't.
I got you guys when y'all were a little bit more mature. I don't know how Scott put up with you guys before that.
I have no idea how he did it. I seriously don't understand. Because, I mean, like I said, back to like the babysitting days, like looking back on it, I'm like, I was probably following him around, like we adored him too. So we're just so nagging and annoying. So
no, but see, so like we always talk about how Amy and Katie and Zane would always ask a million questions. And we love that.
Really?
No, we love that. I loved it because that means that they wanted, you got to get better. So we'd much rather have the people that ask questions and want to get better. Was it a little annoying at times? Sure, but that's okay. That's much better than the kid that will never ask anything. So there you go.
Yeah, I do. I did ask a lot of questions.
No, that's good. Please.
That's funny. Well, what did you ask me right before that though?
No, about coaching, and then you went up you were at Chelsea Piers for a couple of years, right? And and now you're in Orlando. So
so the coaching side of it all, that even goes back to Iona when I was playing. Again, I was on a scholarship, but I still wanted to have beer money. So I'm just kidding. I wanted my quote savings. So I would waitress, babysit, and I would coach. I would coach in Connecticut, which is only 30 minutes away. And I would start coaching and I'm like, wow, I really like this beer money, this beer money and what I'm doing. I really like this. And every summer that I came back from abroad, I would coach in one of those summer leagues in Connecticut. And I would practice with Nyack at the same time. So it's like I'm training, but I'm coaching and keeping the sport with me, so to speak. And I love coaching. I'm very passionate about it. I have always been. So I was with Chelsea Piers for a while. We went to JOs, like 12 and under boys, 12 and under girls. Oh, that's the best.
Oh,
and
yeah.
Then,
herding cats. It's herding cats. So
I loved it. 12 and under boys is my favorite. So
if you lose, you go to the beach. That's all that matters. If you win, you go to the beach. But there you go. So
I know it's a win-win. And then in and out, of course. So
we have that here in Texas now. So
I know.
It's not as special. But thinking back, you pretty much left Texas back in 2010. Mm-hmm. And you really haven't been back here for a significant portion of time, kind of since then. But you've heard all the stories. Thinking back, whenever you were in high school, there were probably about 40 or 50 teams, and now there's about 170 high school teams out there. There's a ton more club kind of going on. So as an outsider kind of look, or as an insider that is now an outsider kind of looking back in, what are your thoughts on Texas nowadays?
So
good and bad. It's okay.
Yeah, I was going to say it's a little bit of both, because ultimately it's for the best. Ultimately we're growing the sport in Texas, and y'all have done such a good job. And I think that has to do with growing more coaches, obviously, and not just in quantity, but in quality. But I think it's a little saturated, maybe from the outsider looking in, as far as, it's like we said before, on my team in 2007, every single person on the high school team played club. Whereas now I'm interested to see how many of them actually play club year round, or how many of them this is their third sport, So I think that makes it a little less competitive. So maybe they're competitive with team A and team B, but that doesn't mean they could compete with us in 2007.
Correct.
I mean, I don't know, maybe they could, but when I saw the championship game 2 years ago in Texas, when I was in Austin visiting my family, I was very happy to see how many teams there were, and how many athletes, and how many girls there. And I mean, I thought it was great, but I was a little disappointed. One, I was sick to my stomach that Sterling wasn't even in there. I'm like, what?
Yeah. And then, what's Sterling?
Yeah. And then two, I just felt I could see the talent, no doubt, of the athletes that I was watching. No doubt I could see the talent, but I didn't see as much as the water polo IQ, as much of the experience level. I just think we were more experienced. And it's a little biased of me to say, but I do believe that. And I even asked Allie her opinion on that, because she has a little pride of both ends. She's been a player and a coach. So you're going to take pride as a coach, obviously.
Yep.
And she agreed with me. I mean, she did agree that the level was a little lower, but again, it's the sacrifice you have to take when you're trying to grow a sport in a huge state.
Yeah. And I do kind of agree with you that 2007 and 2008 Sterling girls is probably the best kind of girls group that I've seen in Texas. But I do believe that there are some very good players nowadays. They're just spread out amongst all the different teams.
Yes, I could definitely see that.
They have, and there's a lot of good talent out there. It's just, it's not all necessarily kind of concentrated on one team. But I think that's going to, there's a ton of water polo. There's a lot more clubs that are building. And we've just only scratched the surface. And, and you were a big part of that. You kind of saw all the different little states just in the 2000s. And you've kind of seen it from the outside kind of a little bit. But Amy, thank you so much for coming on and kind of being a guest here. And hopefully we can get you on here in later this month for one of the Southwest Zone Town Hall meetings as well. Okay?
Yes, I'd love to. Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks so much, Amy.
And that's it for today. So many thanks to Amy Olsen for spending her time on Skype with Joe. And thank you for listening and for your continued support. Until next week, so long from Austin.
Spend it on myself and you, trying to turn the world into a playground with all my might. Tables are turned and the ride is on the way round. Hold on tight, waiting in line, running my mind. I can't wait to get out again. Counting the time, thinking of mine, anything to get out again.
This has been a production of TWP Sports LLC.
My dog is scratching at the door.
I can hear him.